I want to table John Wall for a few minutes here and ask you one question first before we get into John Wall, because obviously John Wall is kind of the elephant in the room on this roster. But looking at this win streak, recent performance, you'd have to think, I mean, any basketball fan could see like Christian Wood on that contract, his trade value is going to be really high right now, as well as Eric Gordon. I guess question one would be, do you think Christian Wood fits the timeline of this team's development? And then for either of those players, do you see them as big names at the deadline?
Yeah, I think Gordon is probably more likely to be moved by the Rockets than Wood. I think Wood is very much a part of their future plans with that young core. Both just in terms of how he's developed here in Houston and his time here so far, but also like if that wasn't the case, who slots in? Şengün just got here. I don't think his game is developed enough, and I don't think they are similar enough players for Şengün to automatically slide into that spot. Yes, the Rockets could go out and get someone else, but they've really been cycling through these like veteran centers the last couple of years. And I think it helps to have that continuity that Wood brings. And I do think he could be an all-star caliber player for them. He obviously, is thriving in their offensive system. They're using him more in pick and rolls with Kevin Porter Jr. So though that partnership has a lot of potential, I think, alone, not to mention just Wood playing with, KJ Martin and the other rookies and all those young guys. So I think he's a part of the future plans for sure. Gordon, I think a lot of it depends obviously on where the Rockets are record-wise and playoff-wise when we get to the deadline. If they continue on this upward trajectory that they're on now and shock everyone and, think that they have a legitimate shot at a playoff spot, then I don't see them giving up Eric Gordon, who has been so valuable for them, not just on defense as we knew he would be, but scoring wise as well. I mean, he's just been really having a vintage season as far as it comes to 3-point shooting, to handling the ball now that they don't really have another point guard. So I think if he's, a huge part of the success as he has been so far, I think they would be more reluctant to give him up.
He's another guy that's been very professional in anything that I've heard, any interview he's given, anything like that. Do you sense any sort of desire on his part to move on from this organization?
I wouldn't say it's a strong desire, but I don't think he would be against it. I think at this point, like, he's just committed to doing what is the best thing for his career. And I think that most guys, when they get to his stage, like, that's how they feel. And I know he was as frustrated as anyone by the losing. He didn't show it. It was kind of his job to like hold it together. But, at one point during the streak, I think maybe they were at either 12 or 13 losses in a row at that point. He like said something to be like, well, like, it can't really get worse. And then of course, like, it did get worse. They lost more. So, I think he's trying to take everything with a grain of salt, but he really does relish his role as kind of a mentor to these younger guys. And, at the advanced stage that he's in his career, like, he's going to have that role no matter where he goes, even if he goes to a contender that also has a bunch of experience. Like, I think his role is very much the same. So he's very secure in what he brings to the table on and off the court. He's going to do that with the Rockets or with any other team. So I don't think it necessarily matters to him at this point.
Yeah. So moving into John Wall, I guess I have two main questions, and you being at the Houston Chronicle covering the Rockets, I'm dying to know your answer. Do you think John Wall is likely to play basketball for the Houston Rockets before the trade deadline? And do you think John Wall is likely to move at the trade deadline this year?
I would be a whole lot smarter if I knew the answer to either of those questions. But honestly, I don't, because the Rockets said, a couple weeks ago now, like, oh, we're going to start ramping him up, whatever that means. We're going to start incorporating him into our practices, and then we'll see where we're at. I guess that was only like a week, maybe 10 days ago. What is time? It's a flat circle. Since then, though, they haven't been able to really do that. Like, there's been no movement. He's not practicing still. Like, he's just kind of doing his own thing. So they still intend, Stephen Silas confirmed the other day, to do that, but there hasn't been much progress made on that front. And you would think that, maybe these injuries that they've had to Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green would have hastened that a little bit. Not that they're all of a sudden going to bring John Wall out and have him be starting. I don't think that's the plan, but I think that's part of the holdup, because that would be an opening that Wall would see and be like, oh, well, that's an obvious spot for me to come help right now. But I think that would end up still being detrimental in the long run to the Rockets, because then how do you, once those guys come back, take John Wall out of your starting lineup? And why bother, having your team and your starters learn how to play with Wall when he's not going to be your guy for the future? So they obviously want him to have a more limited role than he wants. And I think that's kind of the battle that's going on right now, whether that is being said behind closed doors or is being left unsaid. And you're kind of in limbo at the moment in time.
Do you get the sense that the organization is pretty determined to avoid like a buyout with that contract?
I don't think that anyone is ruling out a buyout, but I mean, yeah, it would be nice if they could avoid it. And I think that the thing that gets lost sometimes in discussing like landing spots for Wall and like, well, who's willing to take on that big of a contract is like, it's not just taking on the $47 million. It's you're offloading something too. So you have to look at once we get to the trade deadline, what are other teams trying to move? Who are the big contracts that they're trying to get rid of? And then, addition by subtraction, do the math. So I think if everyone looks at John Wall as if he just has this floating price tag of $47 million above his head, like that's not actually what it is. It's still going to be a hefty chunk of change, but you have to look at the give and take.
Absolutely. Have you heard any, trade machine proposals, anything like that? Seen anything that has kind of caught your eye at this point regarding John Wall?
Honestly, no. I've kind of just like buried my head in the sand regarding all of that. Yeah. Like I'll deal with that in a month or so. It's got my hands full with other stuff at this point.
Danielle, I just want to get your impressions on the rest of the league. What's kind of caught your eye besides just, having all arenas having full capacity full of fans? There's been a lot of great storylines in terms of surprises and the new rules changes and some other storylines. What's caught your eye so far that surprised you that, you didn't think it would be a storyline headed into this season, but now it's one of the top things fans are caring about?
And well, I think it's been funny for me to watch the new rule changes on tuning fouls, because you can tell that like certain players forget sometimes that there's been this change. Eric Gordon has done it a few times where he thinks that he's drawn the foul and he's looking around and then he like remembers like, oh, you can't do that anymore. So it's been interesting to watch that. And I think overall, like that rule change has been good. It's not slowing the game down as much with as many calls, and you can't basically just bait guys into fouling you anymore. So that I think has been a positive change that I wasn't sure if it would be positive or not. But other than that, I mean, team by team, like the Warriors, we knew that they could shoot, right? But I don't think anyone thought their defense was going to be this good. I don't think anyone thought they were going to look this good still without Klay Thompson and without James Wiseman. Yeah. We know what Steph can do. Like he's coming up on some other record of some point, some kind, and no one's surprised about that, the way that guy can shoot. But I think that they're getting contributions from actually a former Rockets G League guy, Gary Payton II. He used to play for RGV Vipers, and he's been really big for them. So I think he's been one of the cool surprises to watch this season.